afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Judge Esther Buster, retired judge. I retired about 14 years ago. Before that, I practiced as a human rights lawyer for more than 30 years. I'm presently tasked as the head of the Office of the Judge for Complaints Unit of the Hawks. I've been with him since September 2013. It's a completely new structure. In fact, it's an oversight structure as well. And we've got two offices, one in Cape Town, which is the office where I am located. And then we have an office in Pretoria. The office in Pretoria is being manned by women manned by the investigators. Our function essentially is to hear complaints from members of the public against members of the Hawks, and also from complaints from members of the Hawks who might have complaints against members of the public, bureaucrats, politicians, etc., etc. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gareth Ewan. I am the head of the Governance, Crime and Justice Division at the Institute for Security Studies. The Institute is an independent, non-government organisation. We're Pan-African, so we have offices in South Africa, but also in Kenya, Ethiopia and Senegal. We work in the broad field of human security. Most of the work I do in South Africa is looking at policy relevant research, technical assistance relating to violent crime, understanding violent crime, how to reduce it. We look at the police and their performance, the function of the criminal justice system, corruption and matters related to government accountability. My background, I have worked in government as well as an advisor to the Gauteng MEC for Community Safety, at that time for Rose Petroleum between 2006 and 2009. And previously to that, we worked at the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation based in Johannesburg. Also do work on police corruption and violent crime. So nice to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Millicent Kewuti. I am in the Civilian Secretariat for Police. I'm heading the Oversight, Monitoring and Evaluation function within the organization. And I've been with the public sector since 2005, mainly responsible for developing monitoring and evaluation systems, and also in charge of IT environments. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Dunn. I'm here from Cape Town. My background is I was a practicing attorney for a number of years. I then joined the City of Cape Town as a legal advisor. I had the privilege to be the legal manager at the City of Cape Town for the 2010 World Cup that spanned the period 2006 to 2011. At the moment, I'm moving into another phase in my life. I'm becoming a consultant, which is something I've always wanted to be. And I will be embarking on that area in my career, consulting to law firm with effect from the 1st of April this year.
Thank you. Thank you, our guest. Then we will start with Madam Millicent Kewuti from the Civilian Secretariat for Police to give us her input. Then from there, questions will follow, and it will be moved in that order. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to kickstart the discussion, the briefing that we received was that we needed to outline what our organization is all about, which is referred to as the Civilian Secretariat for Police. So I'm going to address or give you a bit of a background in terms of who we are, what we do, and how we do it, and where we are located in the democratic landscape. As we are all aware that the role of police is to prevent and detect crime, and also to maintain public order. Now, in order for the police to do that, they have to utilize powers that not other state organs have. Now, the power that the police have are powers to arrest and to detain, and obviously, as I mentioned, the power to use force. Now, it has a legitimate use of non-negotiable lethal force to ensure that the laws are adhered to. Now, this was highlighted in one of the reports that my colleague Graham Newham developed a while ago. Now, in essence, you would understand that since the police have such a power, we need, as a democratic society, to develop mechanisms to ensure that the police are then held accountable in terms of the usage of that power, and also they are able to then respond or respond to the needs of the community. Now, this monopoly on the use of power to arrest and detain places the police in a unique and a sensitive position within our society. And hence, then it was felt that there has to be an establishment of an organization such as ours. Now, we, as the Civilian Secretariat for Police, we are established in terms of Section 208 of the Constitution of South Africa. And we are governed by national legislation, which is referred to as the Civilian Secretariat for Police Service Act, number 2 of 2011. Further, provinces are mandated in terms of Section 206 to monitor police activities within, or police effectiveness within their provincial sphere of governance. Now, our Act empowers us to exercise civilian oversight over the police. Now, that means we are civilians sitting outside of the police service, but we are responsible in monitoring what the police are doing. We also then provide strategic advice to the Minister of Police. We also then liaise with various communities and stakeholders in order to ensure that safety issues are dealt with at a community level. And we also then responsible to align functions between national and provincial government. As I mentioned earlier on, we are a national department established in terms of our Act. We also then expected to promote cooperation between ourselves and the IPID, which is referred to as the Investigative Police, the Independent Police Investigative Directorate. So where are we located in the bigger schemes of things? We are reporting to the Minister of Police, together with other sister organizations, like I've just mentioned, the IPID, but also the SAPS reports directly to the Minister, and the Private Security Regulatory Association, also agency, reports to the Minister. Now, our department is led by the Secretary of Police. Currently, she's in an acting role. Her name is Reneva Furi, and I report into her. My role within the organization is to lead oversight, monitoring, and evaluation, which is one of the core functions. But also then we have the responsibility of developing national policing policy informed by research, and then also draft legislation on behalf of the police, and then also work with various stakeholders and communities, as I indicated earlier on. Now, I'm not going to go into detail in terms of what we do as an organization, or specifically as our unit. The discussion for today is about leadership. And in essence, how do we then fit into the theme of this conference? We are a new organization, as I indicated. With effect from April 2014, we have been established as a national department. So we are responsible for ensuring that police do what they're supposed to do at the end of the day. Now, this is a new area for the country per se, and it hasn't been easy. It has been met with a lot of challenges, in that at the end of the day, we need to ensure that the community out there is able to hold the police accountable. Now, our main aim is to ensure that we improve the trust in the police that is within South Africa, but then also to ensure that we work together with them to highlight pockets of excellence. Now, our appeal, basically, as an organization to you, is that we need to partner with yourselves. We need to ensure that you are engaged in our processes in order for us to be able then to improve policing in the country. In those few words, I'd like to say thank you and hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Millicent. We are running slightly behind schedule, ladies and gentlemen, so I think it will be best for us not to take comments and questions now. So we allow all our speakers to present. After the presentations, then we will ask you to make comments or questions. May I then quickly request Gareth to come and do a presentation. In the meantime, I'll be checking if the judge will still want to do a presentation, and David as well. And then from there, we will take the comments and questions. Let's appreciate him as he comes forward.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I suppose my few words will just take a slightly different approach around trying to understand civilian oversight in policing. South Africa, we know, is a significant crime problem. And in fact, our worst crime year was in 2002-2003, when the police recorded 2.7 million crimes. We saw a big reduction to about 2008 in total amounts of crime, but it was almost about a 30% reduction before total crimes have stabilized. And within that sort of total category of all crime, you see very big differences. So murder, for instance, has come down by over 50% since 1994. But house robberies, street robberies, certainly business robberies have all started going up from about the late 2000s. So this is what the environment the police are involved in. Most of what would really distinguish South Africa's crime challenge is not really overall victimization rates, which may surprise you, are not that different from other countries. About 22% of people every year get victim of some kind of crime. Most of it's not violent, but it is the greater proportion of our crime that is violent that drives a lot of fear and makes it a big issue. In that sort of environment, we have a police agency. Now, we know in democracies, police have to act with the consent and the legitimacy of the public, because they are the only organization that are held accountable through democratic structures. They're paid for by the state, they're public servants, and they should be there to try and engage with crime. But they're also facing an unenviable job, because a vast majority, for instance, of our murders, 2/3 or more, are committed between people who know each other, who live in the same communities, and the various factors that lead to that murder being committed start when people often are younger than the age of 3. So we already know from international studies going back as far as the 1960s that the root causes of violence, the reason why a lot of people become violent and act violently, starts when they're very young, in their first 1,000 years, how they are consistently parented or not, how they are disciplined, what kind of support they're given as they grow up in their families and communities. By the time they become young males, who commit a vast bulk of all violent crimes, both assaults and robberies, those factors have really played a role. So you'll be interested to know that since the 1960s there's been research showing that social workers working for 2 hours a week for a year with children between the age of 3 and 7 can result in those kids being 50% less likely to be violent 10 years later, 50% less likely to experiment with drugs and alcohol, or 50% less likely to be arrested for misdemeanors. But what we do when we get scared of crime is we want to see more police. Police can only really make a big difference against certain kinds of crimes. So really there's a big conundrum, a big dissonance. We've got almost 200,000 people in the South African police service trying to police 53 million people, or maybe 36 million if you say that most of the younger people don't need that much policing. When they should really be trying to police possibly a few tens of thousands of people. Because where police make the biggest differences against robberies and things like that. Now in that system, police and occupational hazard policing everywhere is when you give certain people powers over others, And this is the interesting thing about policing. Individual police officials have the powers to arrest, to detain, but they operate largely out in the public, in people's homes. They're detectives in the back streets of Hillbrow, outside in rural areas and farms. The senior police officials are not there to hold direct accountability. So a common challenge facing police agencies everywhere is one of brutality, where people might use too much force, or corruption, where police individuals might start using their powers to make arrests, to use the discretion to use their powers based on their personal considerations. So those are occupational hazards of policing everywhere. And in organizations like that, all organizations, police organizations, are very strong internal cultures, because you're taking ordinary men and women from a diverse range of backgrounds, putting them in extraordinary situations, a lot of pressure on them, doing a very difficult job, and so they tend to stick together, and that sort of means that when some cops act badly, other cops are not necessarily willing to investigate them or take action against them. So over the many years of democracies, the last 100 years or so, different institutes or different ideas have come around how to do that, and civilian oversight is one of those things. So we in South Africa, our constitutional frame has thought, well, we need two kinds of civilian oversight. We need one that looks at policy and monitoring and evaluating the policy, and that's what Melissa does in the Secretariat. And all provinces have the same kind of secretariats. And that's really an executive oversight function. It means that you can't have a minister who's a politician who's representing the public only getting information from the police about whether they're doing a good job or a bad job. You need to have an independent structure to look at that information, look at the data, and then tell the minister what is the police doing well and what are they not doing so well independently. And then we've got the IPID, which was mentioned, which do the hard investigation. So if somebody dies in police custody as a result of police action, or you experience a severe case of torture or assault, you can go to that body, and they're civilians to investigate the police. But as you can see, it's not an easy thing. And I think I'll end off very quickly by saying we must be very careful to limit our expectations of what civilian oversight structures can do, because I've seen this in Parliament. When Melissa's organisation presents to politicians in the Portfolio Police Committee, and when IPA do, they often ask, why are the police doing such a bad job at X, Y, and Z? Why are we getting complaints from the communities? As if it's the job of the civilian oversight to fix policing. It's not. It can only ever be police management who provides strong ethical guidance, strong leadership, who act like the best police officer that you can have, and make sure that they put in place the systems and put the resources that are necessary to both train, support, and guide police officials who have the difficult task of fighting what is a largely violent crime problem in our communities. The civilian oversight structures can only ever be an independent voice that helps those who have the ultimate authority, the public, the ministers in a democracy, information that allows them to assess whether the police are doing good or bad jobs and hold them directly the leadership of the police account. So I'll stop there, and hopefully that's some food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gareth. I think indeed it is some food for thought. Without any further waste of time, let me just invite Deb to come in and have some few words before we move into questions and comments. David, can we appreciate David, please?
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be here today and to be able to talk to you. I'll be very brief because I realize that time is of the essence. I think going through the Civil Secretariat's tasks, or what they're tasked with, what made a big impression on me is that they're tasked with conducting quality assessments of the police service, monitor and evaluate its performance, identify problem areas for early interventions, reviewing police practices and develop best practical models, recommending steps for improved service delivery and police effectiveness. I think what's critical here today is that this is a leadership course. All of you here are leadership, have a huge responsibility on your shoulders because you are the leaders of tomorrow. And I think it's critical that if the civilian secretariat is going to function effectively, it is to a large extent dependent on the quality and the support that you give us, that you give the secretariat, particularly, I think, in identifying problem areas for early intervention. I don't think that one should be seen as always criticizing the police. I'm very appreciative of the fact that the police have an extremely difficult job to do, and it's always easy to sit on the sidelines or to sit on the stand and criticize what's happening on the field. However, having said that, I do believe if we look at those key tasks that I've just addressed, you as a group have an obligation to support the Secretariat and encourage debate around those issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Now is the time to ask questions or comments. As he has indicated that there is a big space of leadership in the context of the communities. Others were talking about leadership in the context of being parents and ethics, because when we talk about parenting, about discipline, those are very crucial areas that we need to consider in the context of leadership. Let us get some few questions to our panelists, or any form of comments.
My name is Lucas myself, and what I just want to find out is that, first of all, I was under the impression that this organization was a duplication of IP, but I think House Millicent clarified that part in terms of differentiation of roles. Now, what I want to know is what instruments are used to measure the performance of the police, and what interventions does the organization normally put in place when they find poor performance, and what is the level of powers that the organization has brought in order to ensure that the police adheres to their performance.
Okay, maybe let us take some few first, a maximum of 3, then we give to the panel. Any other comment or question? Okay, what's it?
My name is Mrs. Sadi. I work for an NGO mainly on what relationship does your offices have with NGOs in terms of addressing these issues? We have a lot of young people that we work with that go back to their respective communities to try and address social issues. And I'll give an example. One of our participants we had wanted to address the issue of drugs, and then when they go back to their communities, they wanted to inform the police officers of what's going on in their township. But when they go there, they were not, how can I put this, they didn't get the support that they require to be able to do this work they wanted to do. So my question is basically, what work or what policies or policies should be put into place to address such issues when young people who are trying to create change in their communities are met with difficulties from the people who should be receiving assistance from?
Thank you.
Just one question from myself. I'd like to know, with situations that the gentleman behind you just mentioned, and other things where you don't have a world of knowledge as far as this corruption has taken place and the evidence with the Secretariat and the Office of the Judge, would you approach them with just a feeling of that this is happening and you've identified this happening, but you don't have enough information to say, or evidence? Is that still something that the public should be involved with approaching you for, or is there another procedure that they should go to before it would end up with the Secretariat or the Office of the Judge?
Thank you. That's quite crucial questions. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. In terms of instruments that we utilize to measure police performance, firstly, we look at the planning processes within the SAPS, how planning is undertaken, what informs their strategic objectives and their indicators. So in essence, we will look at the strength plans, the APP, and analyze that and provide feedback in terms of how those have been formulated, and those are then factored into the development process. Now, we then also look at how the SAPS utilizes their budget. We have a different role from what the National Treasury and the Office of the Auditor General look at in terms of the budget. We mainly focus on key priority areas that the Minister is looking into. For instance, like building of police stations. So we will then consolidate all the information from the different sources and compile a report and then make recommendations. Wherever we identify gaps, we then make recommendations. But But then also we go to the various police stations. We send out teams. As I mentioned earlier on, we have provincial offices, what are normally referred to as provincial departments of community safety. We work closely with them. We go to police stations and do sort of, I would regard them as inspections, based on their own policies to say, now, if your national instruction stipulates that this is how you're going to implement the Domestic Violence Act, we then go and just check issues of compliance and how then the service is then delivered. But then also what we're adding in terms of the tools that we're utilizing right now is the community voice element, which was non-existent. To say now, it's one thing to assess how the service is delivering services, but we also need to now interview people who have received the service from the SAPS and then compare both of those. It's been quite a challenge, especially in terms of accessing data within the SAPS, but we're working on setting up institutional arrangements between ourselves to ensure that we get the information that we require in order for us to make recommendations. Now, we also then look at other aspects. We look at police conduct issues. How police behave when they do their work. Do they adhere to issues of human rights? Do they violate some of their instructions? So we look at various aspects. We look at also root causes in terms of what causes litigation. And in most cases, we find that it's wrongful arrest. We then make recommendations as to how the SAPS needs to correct such processes. We look at discipline. We look at complaints. We also receive complaints against the public. Now, these complaints are different from the complaints that are being received by the IPID. IPID looks at death in police custody, rape, and also issues of corruption. As a result also of police, or within the police custody. Now, we then look at the rest of the complaints, that is service delivery related complaints. Now, we are in the process of ensuring that systems are in place so that when we then go out and make an announcement to the public to say all complaints need to be registered with the Civilian Secretariat, we are also ready to deal with such. So there is quite a lot. We also then evaluate the effectiveness of some of their programs that they're implementing. For instance, like visible policing, we will be looking into that to say, does the fact that when you wake up in the morning and you see a police vehicle at the corner, does that mean you are safer? Or does it lead to actually a person feeling safe? And does it mean that that resource is utilized in a correct manner? So there's quite a lot of issues, and we're looking at programs that have been in implementation for quite a while, and you start to evaluate whether are they making the impact that they're supposed to, is the return on investment in such instances. Now the powers, now as I mentioned, we make recommendations. Now these recommendations are submitted to the minister. The minister is the one who has the authority to instruct the SAPS to implement. We, in essence, are able to give instructions to the SAPS. And in terms of relationships with NGOs and civil society organizations, we have set up reference groups. Now you'll notice that this is quite a specialized area, and in most cases we don't have the necessary skills. So we utilize experts, that is within the communities, within academia, within various agencies that are interested in dealing with criminal justice issues. We then co-opt them into the work that we do. So we have, for instance, groups that look at youth issues. We have various reference groups that deal with safety and security issues with regard to a specific group. And we normally send invitations and invite participation. So we have various organizations that are participating at this stage. And that is then how we then involve the community. But we also then have dialogues. We have national dialogues. We recently had a dialogue on police conduct issues, which will then be supposed to assist us to develop a strategy on how to monitor police conduct in that area. So there is quite a lot of work. We will not be able to do it alone. That is why the appeal we are making is that we need to strongly partner with you so that we are able to bring about change. This morning, in the session we had earlier on, they were talking about change. How do you bring about change? We all know that the trust level in terms of police is very low. How do we turn that around? It's our responsibility. The police cannot do it on their own. And in terms of the question about how to get in touch, yes, there's information. We've got a website referred to as the Police Secretariat website. There is
an immediate. Would you need to have serious evidence and this kind of thing as far as cases to go, or is there a structure of a way to get in touch to basically say, yes, this is something that you guys would deal with, or just analyze for you through phone?
You see, if there are complaints, in most cases we guide it by the monitoring data we collect, right? That then gives us an early warning to say there are issues, for instance, like availability of vehicles at the police station, that we can have through our monitoring data. But then also, it is the responsibility of the public to also inform us if there are areas that are of concern, and we will then take it
So
up.
if I, for instance, realize that my police station doesn't have enough vehicles and I feel like they're not, delivering on what they need to do for security in my area, I would then contact you with that information.
Yes, you would have to, and then we will then have to make sure that we act up on that information, because that is mainly our responsibility.
Yeah, with regard to the office of the judge, it has very limited scope for investigation. It is particularly confined to the members of the Hawks, any complaints against them, and also any complaints from members of the Hawks against politicians, etc. So it's actually confined to that particular area. But we've also got the right of referral. In other words, if any complaint comes to us, which doesn't strictly fall within our mandate, we can refer it to a number of other structures or agencies. And it's specifically specified there. For example, we could refer complaints to the Secretariat, we could refer complaints to the public prosecutor if we find that a crime has been committed. We can also refer it to IPAD or to the Public Protector or the Human Rights Commission. So we've got the right of referral. The question in terms of our founding charter, we together with the Secretariat have to embark on an awareness campaign. And we've gone extensively on an awareness campaign. We covered all the offices nationally of the Hawks. We've also covered so far about 5 provinces as far as the public is concerned. And there we had a number of NGOs coming who attended the meetings where we explained to them what our particular function was, and also together with the Secretariat, they also informed the public what their particular function was. And we need to keep the public informed so that they could exercise their particular rights should they have any grievances or any complaints. Our role as the Office of the Judge, we don't have enforcement powers. In other words, we can't arrest people, charge them, etc. But we can refer them to the relevant authority who could in fact do so. Our function essentially is to make recommendations, and the recommendations in respect of each case goes to the Minister. Annually, we report to Parliament on the performance of our officers. So essentially, the information gets to Parliament, information gets to the Minister. They could then make certain policy decisions which emanate from our particular investigations. Thank you.
Gareth, do you have any comment to make, especially with reference to working with NGOs?
Yeah, I think it's a very important area. There are a number of NGOs that work with the reference groups. They either do research, in other words, such as ourselves, we track crime data, we go into prisons, we speak to repeat violent offenders who be convicted for 2 or more crimes to look at why they do it, how they do it, what the issues there are. We track and assess violent crime types across the country in all 1,000, almost 200 precincts. And we keep up to date with international organizations. We look at the latest research coming out of different countries on policing and police tactics and responses to get a better sense of what's possible. So that's one role that NGOs, I think, can play to assist the civilian secretariat. And on the other hand, there's a lot of organizations that provide services. So, for instance, the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation provides trauma counseling to victims of torture, sometimes as a result of police torture. And others that work with foreign vulnerable groups, poor people or with foreign nationals around the country. And they pick up a lot of information, often about police service delivery or police challenges. So they also have a very important role to play. So I think South Africa is fortunate in the sense that we have a very vibrant civil society that has various roles to play to assist the sort of oversight work that Civilian Oversight does, Secretariat does.
Thank you. I think we have about 4 minutes to close now. But we still take about 2 or so comments, critical ones now. Yes, sir?
Yeah, just want to...
Let's introduce yourself so that they can...
Okay. My name is from Secretariat. I just want to get a comment specifically from Gareth. In terms of, you spoke earlier about the number of police officers versus the population. And I just want to get a sense from you, because if you dissect that, it's not necessarily 200,000 or close to 200,000. If you take away the public, the PS, then it comes to like 145. And in that 145, you take along all those who are doing support, then you are left with more or less 90,000 police officers. So I just need to get a sense from you whether what will be an equitable number of police officers that we could have, that are specifically those who are doing the operations, the day-to-day operations, so that we can have a kind of equal. Because I think even the ratio that is used now is used based on the 199 or so thousand, and I think that's becoming a problem.
Okay, before Gareth speaks, do we have any other burning comment or question?
Just a quick question, Robert answer. The Secretariat does that report to the Minister of Police?
Yes.
Yes, we report to the Minister of Police, yes.
Is that not a bit of a... I have difficulty with that. I mean, the Secretariat is supposed to oversee the police, reporting to the very same minister who appoints the police, and they have to oversee. If there's any comments from the panel on that.
Gareth and Billy, I think you have to respond to that. I think the judge will respond in a comment on that issue. But let's start with Gareth first.
No, I just spoke.
Yeah.
Judge, please.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, I also report to
The same minister.
the Minister of Police, and we in the same category. And the reason why we report to the police, because they administer our budget. So although we are independent in a sense, the money must come from Parliament, and the Minister, in fact, budgets the amount in his overall budget for us as well. Then obviously we also got a responsibility to Parliament itself, so we report directly to Parliament in respect of our particular performance. I mean, it is possibly not the ideal situation, but up till very recently, we also had the judiciary under the Minister of Justice. And I think there was the question of whether that was strictly independent from the executive. And I think what has happened there, I mean, even internationally, the budget is in fact allocated to the judiciary by the executive. Now, there is that particular connection. And obviously the argument is, can you have sufficient independence when someone else is pulling the money strings, you see? And that has always been a debate that's been going on, and they haven't found a solution to that problem. What they've done in South Africa was to give a budget to the Chief Justice now, to get that. But that still comes via because they don't have the administrative structure. So it comes via the Department of Justice, but it's now handed over to the Chief Justice. He administers the justice. So there is this, shall I say, hybrid situation of whether what constitutes independence. Can you have complete independence?
I mean, I think on that, the judge has clearly pointed that out, and I think it's always a challenge. But I think when they were framing the Constitution, the real idea was that the police would always, as any organization does, would always present its work in the best possible light. So if you look at the way the police report in their annual reports or before Parliament, they're generally saying, look, we're doing a fantastic job. There's so many arrests we've made, and indeed, they make almost 1.7 million arrests every year, and we've had so many roadblocks, and we seized this many drugs. So it's, it's very positive. But then, of course, the politicians go into communities. They're elected by the South African public, and they have very different stories. They don't come out when you call them. They're corrupt. They're brutal. So the minister, who's the public representative for the governing party, is getting different sets of information. So the idea that the drafters of the Constitution have is, well, let's set up a separate independent agency that are not staffed by police officials. They may all report to the police minister, but at least the police minister has then the option of deploying the independents or the civilian staff who are not in the police to go and independently assess what maybe some of these challenges are. In the case of IPID, it's to investigate hard cases. So if you say I've been tortured or police beat me up or something like that, they'll go and investigate the evidence. Well, the Civilian Secretariat is to look at when the police say that they don't have enough vehicles. Is that really the case, or is it they're not managing the vehicles they have properly? For that kind of thing. So I think that's one way of maybe understanding the role of civilian oversight agencies.
Yeah, just to add on, we've also raised this question within our strat planning process, and what's refreshing is that the current minister that we have is able to give space for such discussions. But the crux of the matter is that if we were to be completely independent, we would have to go and change the Constitution. Now, Section 208 clearly stipulates that we need to operate under the direction of the Minister of Police, and that's where the challenge is.
Okay, thank you very much. I think, colleagues, this brings us to the end of the session. From myself, John Dow, and my co-facilitator here, we're excited that you guys have been very wonderful audience. Can I appreciate our